I'm Tammy Lee Meyer, and I'm joined by Brittany Linder, and welcome to Surrender. So today I was thinking we would start off with doing a bit of a reading of the state of the world today. So Brittany, maybe you can just drop in and share your perceptions.
Okay, cool. So I'll just take a minute. Okay. Okay. So what I just did was kind of held the intention of sensing into what the totality of all of our consciousnesses on Earth is kind of experiencing as a whole. And the first emotion that came up was anxiety. So my heart started to beat fast. My breath was more shallow. And I got the sense that the reason for that emotion is the amount of change that's happening on Earth right now and the rate at which it's happening. It's happening very fast. Things are starting to speed up. We're going down a very fast track of evolution that a lot of people aren't used to. And that kind of causes a sense of uneasiness. And I think it may also stem from an internal awareness of our potential. And when people kind of see that we're not there yet, like we are going very fast. I'm very pleased with the rate that we're all evolving. But knowing where we could be and not being there yet, I think that kind of causes an uneasy, unstable feeling in people. Also, there's an increasing awareness of our interconnectivity between all humans, all animals, all plant life. And with that comes an easier ability to tap into things that are happening in the world, whether it's from you or not. So you may accidentally, or not accidentally, it's our nature to be connected. We are connected, but you could be kind of merging with energies that aren't of you, and they might be negative, and it might ruin your day. And you might think, oh, I was having such a great day. Like, why did that shift occur? So I think becoming aware that we are all connected, literally. And sometimes if you're experiencing a negative emotion, it doesn't necessarily mean it's from you. There's an unearthing of a lot of darkness in the world today. And it's possible, and I do this often actually, where I tap into it and my mood will just shift because we're all connected and it's just our nature. So I think the protective mechanisms I spoke about in the first episode can be very powerful for people to help protect themselves and help shield themselves in a bubble of white light, because there is, even though we are connected, we do have a choice to stay in the light, even if there is the presence of darkness around us. And I think the most important thing to touch upon about what we're all experiencing as a whole right now is the fact that we have wounds that are surfacing that are very deep. So this is happening on all levels. It's happening for the earth. It's happening as a whole. It's happening politically. It's happening for every individual. And this isn't just wounds that have been created in our childhood or when we were younger. These are wounds that have been with our souls for lifetimes. So they're deep and they're intense, and they cause an uprising of potentially very dark, deep emotion, and it can be very uncomfortable. And what I've learned is that every time I go through a very intense transition or a very big kind of purge of things that have been present in me that are wanting to be dealt with, it's never pretty. Healing is never pretty. So my wounds will surface, and these emotions and these feelings come out, and these personality traits. And I have moments where I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, does my personality suck now? And I just need to remember this happens every time. You can't heal something and not have it come to the surface. You have to be able to look it in the face and change something about it. So these dark energies, these dark emotions, they're coming to the forefront so that they won't be ignored anymore. So I think that for people to acknowledge, okay, I'm not crazy. This is happening in the whole world. This is happening to every person I know. It's happening to me. And it's part of it. It's part of the healing process. And to acknowledge, if I let these come out, let them process, don't hold on to them. There's no need to make yourself suffer longer. That's what's going to cause suffering. It's going to be letting them surface, judging yourself for it, and making them stay longer than they need to. So letting those emotions come out, letting yourself process whatever you're processing, and then letting it go. Because so much space is being made in our consciousness as a whole and in each individual, because we're meant for so much more on Earth, and we're going somewhere a lot different than where we are now, and it's going to be really beautiful, but this is part of it. All the crap has to come out if it's going to be gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things, thank you so much, Brittani.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate your clarity and just what it is to kind of dip into that sense of wholeness and the true nature of us, to be able to get a sense of what's going on, because we feel it, but how do we put words on it,
right,
so that we can relate it to people and people can know what they can do, or at least not feel alone.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah, I feel in the majority of, actually all of the private healing sessions that I've had lately have been a person coming to me, and like I said before about myself, they really think they're going crazy. They're like, what's wrong with me? I don't know why these emotions are coming up. There must be something wrong. So I think the primary thing is acknowledging that there is nothing wrong. And I've gotten to the point now where I almost get, like, it's not fun for these things to come up, but I get kind of excited when they do, because I'm aware now, even as they are up, that all this means is that once this is processed, once this is dealt with, my life will be different. This energy that's coming out of me won't be a part of my energy field anymore. So there is space, the amount of space that our wounds are taken up, there's not enough room for that anymore for where we're going. Yeah. So it's acknowledging that this is what's happening. It's happening to everyone. And don't be afraid to talk to your friends about it. It's happening to everyone. I think people kind of are staying a little bit more silent about it because they're not aware that everyone I have spoken to in the last year is going through a lot of stuff right now. Everyone is. So talk to someone and they will relate to you. Yeah, and just get excited about what your life can look like without that energy that might have been at the forefront, or it might have been hidden. With that being gone, what could your life look like? What could there be space for?
Yes. And for me, I've been feeling this piece that you talk about, and I kind of characterize it as the field. That, when I see a bunch of people, including myself, have a dip where we're like, okay, this is terrible. And, clearing those emotions, that it helps me so much to know that I'm not alone. Yeah. And, just in terms of how I'm feeling and seeing the world, what you said really resonates in terms of us really at this point of developing our consciousness, and maybe putting ourselves in our place as a part of nature. So I mentioned when we saw each other in person yesterday that I've been deeply inspired by a book that it's really amazing. I'll just show it on screen here. It's called Original Thinking, and the author is Glenn Aparicio Perry. And essentially what he did was he over the course of, I think, 13 years, convened conversations between Indigenous elders and scholars and Western scientists, and they had
Awesome.
dialogues
Very
over
cool.
13 years. And a lot of what science is coming up to maps exactly to what Indigenous people have known all along, right? And so the book itself is, it when I read it, I cry, because it's this really deep sense of resonance and remembrance of our origins and what we're here to do and what we're here to connect with. And so for me, this kind of conversation and dialogue that we're having now kind of represents that, in us being able to share with each other and the world how we see this moment in time in this journey, because we need to talk about it. We need to look at it.
Yeah.
And we need to help each other through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. This whole individualized culture that we have, it's not going to work anymore. It's not working. I mean, us being in competition with each other, the fact that we're connected, there's no way that can work. If you feel like you need to take away from others to be whole, then you are taking away from you. That's the only thing that will come of that. I mean, it's hard to kind of grasp sometimes when we're in this physical vessel that we actually are all the exact same.
Yes.
We are pieces of the whole. Without one piece, it is not whole. We are fragments of something beautiful and big, and letting that kind of guide your actions, guide your thoughts, and guide your life, you will only enhance your life. I think sometimes people think, it has to be, there's kind of a, what's the word? We think that resources are scarce, and we think we have to fight for them. And we think that we need to be in competition with one another. But all that brings is competition with the self, and no one's ever going to win. Yes. There is enough love, there's enough energy, there's enough everything that we need to go around for everyone. And if we just acknowledge that, this world will just be in harmony. And I think we're slowly coming out of that individualistic culture, and we simply have to, if we're going to evolve, because it's not what the reality is. So it goes against our very nature, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. And then also tagging on a little bit to what you were saying about when we work through our own stuff, I feel like when I actually transform something for myself, that goes into the field too. So
yes,
it's not just serving me when I heal myself, it's serving the field and everyone I know.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Don't know yet.
Yeah, totally. That was, I'm so happy you said that, because that's something else that's so important to talk about. We're not just processing our personal stuff. I've gotten to the point where when people come to me and they're like, why am I experiencing this? What's wrong with me? I tell them that they should be proud of themselves, because they have chosen on a soul level, whether it was conscious or not, they have chosen to allow not just their personal wounds, but energy patterns that we have created on earth that aren't working, to have them come through them, to have them process them, to have them evolve through them. And then they have healed a portion of the world. So it's not just our personal stuff. We are conduits for this energy, this totality of energy. Yes. And there is a darkness that is coming up. It's not going to win ultimately, but it has to be processed, and it's processing through us.
What are some of the biggest things that you're really working with right now, Brittani?
Right now, it's been pretty general, but I think so. Ultimately, if you are to evolve, there is a death of the ego that has to occur. So I think what happens is I can experience a lot of resistance in my growth sometimes, because there's a portion of me, my ego, that it's under the illusion that we are all separate, and it wants to keep existing. It wants to keep me separate. It wants me to keep believing that it is a separate entity. And I think that's the biggest thing I'm struggling with. And it happens on so many levels, where there will be something that I'm about to do that will provide a deep level of healing for me, or a deep level of change. And there's almost this part of me, I can hear my ego almost talking, saying it doesn't want to do it, and I don't feel like doing it, and I'm tired, and I don't want to do it. This part of me just comes out that resists what I need most, or really not feeling like meditating, which is so easy. It's the easiest thing I can do all day. It's sitting there not doing anything. But my ego hates when I do that, because it knows that as I evolve, as I grow, it is less and less relevant. It literally starts to die. So there's this part of us, like our teacher Jerry calls it our animal. It's this physical aspect of ourself that is the ego. And if we are to evolve and move up the chakras, up to our crown chakra, where we experience our connectivity with all other souls, there comes a point where your ego must die, and it knows that it is becoming less relevant. It knows that it is dying, and it gets to a point where it starts to fight. It starts to fight for its life, because it knows you don't need it as much anymore, and it doesn't want that. So that's definitely been the biggest thing. It's the battle with this part of me that doesn't want to grow, and me having to consciously choose, no, I want to grow, and I don't choose my ego, I choose my spirit. And I think that's a battle that a lot of people go through, because that's what growing is. It's choosing your spirit over your ego.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good for people to hear what our personal challenges are, because it is always relevant.
Totally.
You mentioned Jerry, our teacher, and if for us, and what I've learned in Jerry's class is that I can learn so much more in relationship to others and watching their journey. And it means that I don't necessarily have to fall down and smash my face into the ground to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I think that we are all battling with the ego. And, and I think there's this sort of in between space where we are all connected, as you say, and that we're all part of this whole. And there's this yearning for connection. And yet we want to own our little part of it, and there's a tension in that that I think is across the board for everyone.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
So what are some of the tools that we can use to kind of really, humility, like practicing humility, being honest with these things with each other, and helping each other to see how we kind of navigate it? I think that really, sharing that part of the story in a humble way, because none of us, like for me, I think there's a people want to sort of, especially if they're really excited about something, they want to share what they've learned as if they know it. But there's this different stages of knowing where it's actually become a part of your being.
Right.
And that's, when you begin to know something, that's one of the first stages. But then there's this battle with the ego where we own that knowing or something. And then there's a transition to a state of being where we've got it in our bones and our marrow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if you want to share anything, any tools or any ways that you feel have really worked for you in terms of making those transitions to learning, knowing, and then being.
Right. I'm like trying to think of something, but I feel like the process of moving from learning something to having it truly internalized, all of those, I can remember so many of those moments where it was like, okay, I knew that cognitively, but there's this moment where you know it, like your soul knows it, you actually know it, and it's it's a point where you can't put that experience into words because it just makes sense in your being.
Yes.
And you could have heard it be said by others for 10 years, but there comes a point where you actually know things. And I don't know if I kind of feel like that process has been kind of natural and has kind of happened on its own. The step from the learning to the internalization, at least. I feel like as we evolve and as we grow, there comes a point where you are in a perfect internal environment to truly know something.
Yes.
So I think just consciously wanting to always be better, consciously wanting to always choose your spirit over your ego, those things will just happen naturally because you're not going to understand things before you're ready to.
Yes.
And I think just focusing on the growth and the guidance of your soul, those things will just happen naturally, because there is so many hidden forces working with us, and they're waiting for that moment. And so is your soul, where you are ready to know something, and they know exactly what's going on. Like, they're always with you. So exactly when that moment comes, you're going to internalize something. And I think just focusing on growth is the best thing that people can do.
Yes. And like you talked about earlier, to share with your friends, to talk about it with people.
Yeah.
And share your experience.
Yeah. And yeah, totally. And the biggest thing that's prevented me in the past from speaking about things that are coming up for me is fear of being judged, or feeling afraid of being vulnerable. And it is so powerful to show a side of you that is vulnerable, because it shows other people that they can also be vulnerable. And if we're not vulnerable, then everyone's just being fake. So like, we all have stuff coming up. We all don't have it figured out. So you can actually help your healing go so much faster by just letting it come out and being real about it. The longer it's pushed away or ignored, the longer it's an unhealed part of you. So you can grow so fast if you just let stuff come out and you're real about it and you show it and you don't hide it. And there is such strength in being vulnerable. It's very powerful.
So just before we did this session today, we decided to call this series of segments Surrender.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to hear just your intention and your thoughts around surrender.
Yeah. So our last segment was on surrender, but I think your idea of calling the entire series Surrender is it's perfect, because this being a spiritually driven, truth driven kind of series, we're constantly working with this idea of how do we grow, how do we evolve, how do we heal. And at the core of all the things that allow us to do all of those, to grow, to heal, to evolve, is surrender. Whether we call it something different or whether we have different tools for it, the way that you ascend, the way that you become one with your soul, the way that you are in a state where you truly perceive us all as one, it's through surrender. Mm-hmm. It's through surrendering your impulses that may come up because we're in physical bodies. It's through surrendering your ego. It's through surrendering this individualistic part of yourself that doesn't want to be experienced as a whole. It's through surrender of everything. And then at the end of it, for people who have reached the highest level of consciousness, where they truly experience the fact that we are all one, I think for a lot of us, it's still just in our head. At the last step of things, they had to surrender themselves. So yeah, I think surrender is at the core of everything that we're trying to talk about here. And if there's one thing that you take away from how to become closer to God, it's surrender. So.
Brittani, thank you so much for who you are, for how you bring yourself to this work, and for sharing your knowledge and wisdom.
Of course. Thank you, Tammy.
Yeah. All right. So until next time.
Cool.